See, we have our attendees, so I think we're good to go. So I guess I'll start by saying welcoming everyone back. Thank you guys for coming out tonight. This is meeting number 7, and today's date is Monday, September 13th, 2021. I'm Councillor William Riley, and I'll be the chair of this meeting, and just go over a few housekeeping rules. Due to the efforts to contain the spread of COVID-19 and to protect all individuals, the council chambers will not be open to the public to attend a standing committee and council meetings until further notice. The public may submit comments for matters that are on the agenda to jdyson@westlincoln.ca before 4:30 on the day of the meeting. Comments submitted will be considered as public record or public information and will be read into the public record. The meeting will be recorded and available on the township website within 48 hours of this meeting unless otherwise noted. I will also note Councillors Trombetta, Rayner, and Councillor Yonker have sent their regrets due to personal matters and other commitments, so they'll unfortunately not be with us this evening. That being said, I'm going to go forward and do the land acknowledgement statement. On behalf of the members of council and staff, we wish to acknowledge this land on which the Township of West Lincoln operates. The land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the, I wrote it down here, so hopefully I don't screw this up, of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, and is still home to many Indigenous people today. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work here and to follow the Haudenosaunee and systems and blending laws and values of the Anishinaabe beliefs to strive to live in harmony and balance throughout the municipality. We acknowledge that we are all treaty people and we accept our responsibility to honor all of our relations. So at this point, I'm going to go forward and ask if there's any pecuniary or conflict of interest among members of council. Not seeing any. We're going to go forward to our planning meeting. Let me make sure I got the right window up here. My apologies. Bring this over here. So this is a public meeting. I called it planning meeting, but it's a public meeting. This is a public meeting to consider an official plan amendment. Make sure, I have the right one. Garden Suite Policy Amendment, file number 1701-00321. The Planning Act requires in section 1715 that before adopting an official plan amendment, council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect of the amendment. The purpose of this public meeting is to receive comments and answer questions from the public regarding the amendment to the Township of West Lincoln's official plan. We stress that at no point no decision has been made on the proposed amendments, and any comments received will be taken into account by council and their consideration. The Planning Act also requires under Ontario Regulation 543-06 that council advise the public that if a person or public body does not make an oral submission at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of West Lincoln before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of council for the Township of West Lincoln to the Ontario Land Tribunal, formerly known as LPAT. Would the deputy clerk please advise the method and dates by which notice of the public meeting was given?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Proper notice was given by way of advertising in local newspapers and posted on the township's website on August 5th, 2021, as well as notice circulated to all agencies on August 11th, 2021.
Thank you. Will Planner 2, Madison Etzel, please explain the purpose and reason for the proposed official plan amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Township's Planning Department has requested an application for an official plan amendment policy change. This amendment would change the temporary garden suite time limitations as currently referenced in section 18.4 of the Township of West Lincoln official plan from a maximum timeline of 10 years to a maximum of 20 years. On November 10th, 2014, official plan amendment number 44 was approved by bylaw 2014-102 as recommended by planning staff through report PD 14614. This official plan added a new section to the official plan on affordable housing policies, OPA 44, by the creation of a new section 17. The staff report made reference to the garden suite policy changing the temporary bylaw timeline from 10 to 20 years. However, it was not changed as part of the amendment process. The Planning Act has changed section 37 to permit temporary zoning bylaws for garden suites for up to 20 years in the first instance, with the opportunity to extend it for 3 years after the initial time period. Planning staff have been in consultation with regional planning staff in regards to the change for the maximum amount of time for a temporary garden suite to be increased from 10 to 20 years. The regional official plan does not specifically speak to garden suites, however, does support temporary dwelling units in the agricultural area for relatives of the occupants of the principal dwelling. Regional and township policies supports development that contributes to a range of housing types, including housing that is affordable, accessible, and suited to the needs of different household and income groups. All other agencies were circulated on July 16th as part of the circulation process, and no objections to this amendment. There have been no public comments, and planning staff note that once a bylaw is proposed by Township Council to adopt OPA number 61 and notice of decision is circulated without appeal, that the new official plan is in full force and effect. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Madison. So at this point, I'll ask members of the public, are there any oral writ submissions from anyone present on this Zoom meeting regarding the proposed official plan amendment? I would like to stress that this may be the only public meeting held with respect to this application. Therefore, if any members of the public that are in attendance at this Zoom meeting would like to make comments and or provide written comments, they should do so now by using one of the two options. If you're on a computer or smartphone, you're just going to raise your hand, and which can be found within the Zoom settings. If you're on a landline, you're going to dial *9, and that's going to notify staff that you're interested in speaking. Once you've been acknowledged, we do ask that you unmute your microphone. It is important that you provide your comments now, and if you have not done so already in writing or verbally, OLT, also known as the Ontario Land Tribunal, may not consider comments made during any other council and or committee meeting. Also, anyone wishing to speak are required to also unmute their microphone to talk, and then once they're finished, they should mute their microphone again. Prior to speaking, please provide your name and address for the record. So at this point, I'm going to look around our virtual room here and see if there's any members that are interested in asking any questions. I'm not seeing any. I'll give you maybe 3 more seconds. If someone puts a late hand up, we can always accommodate. And then not seeing any, I'm going to ask members of committee, do any members of committee have any oral or written submissions on the proposed official plan amendment? Please note again that members of committee must make their comments now, as OLT may not consider the comments made at any other council or committee meeting. Any member of council wishing to speak are required to unmute their microphone to talk. And then once again, once they finish talking, they can mute their microphone again. So I see Councillor Ganan.
Okay, just one quick comment about the value of this. I think in this day and age where we're talking at all levels of government about affordable housing, that it is very appropriate for our council to be looking at this situation now in support of people staying on the farm and keeping other family members on their properties as well. So I think this is a good move. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other members of council or committee here interested in speaking to this? Not seeing any. Please be advised that a technical report is being considered this evening, and that a recommendation report will be forthcoming to a future council and or committee meeting. Please also be advised that once committee and or council has made their decision with respect to the official plan amendment, and if approved by council, a notice of its passing will be circulated with an appeal period. If you wish to be notified of council's decision, please ensure that you email the township clerk, Joanne Shime, at jshime@westlincoln.ca. Anyone who's interested in observing council and or committee meetings, discussions about a particular bylaw should not solely rely on mail notices and thus miss the opportunity to attend applicable meetings. It is suggested that you watch the township website regularly for posting of agendas to review items that can be discussed at a council and or committee meeting. The agendas for meetings are posted on the township website after 4 p.m. every Friday prior to a meeting. Additionally, meeting schedules are also noted on the township website for public to view. If you wish to receive notices by email, it is suggested that you contact the township clerk to advise of your request and include your email along with your mailing address and your phone number. So at this point, I'm going to, this planning meeting with respect to the proposed official plan amendment is concluded at the hour of 6:38 p.m.
Councillor, I believe Brian Treble had something to say.
Sorry, I got caught up in my reading here. So sorry, go ahead, Director.
Just for the record, Mr. Chair, I know you were reading from a prepared script,
Yes.
but we do actually have a recommendation report before committee tonight. So it is a recommendation report which will go to council. I think you said a tech with a rec coming later, which is standard. This is a little bit different because we're trying to expedite this process, and it should be fairly straightforward.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Okay, so the meeting is still concluded at 6:38 p.m. and I'm gonna bring up the other window. Just moving forward to our second public meeting this evening? All right. So the second public meeting is a zoning bylaw amendment application submitted for the Township of West Lincoln Housekeeping Amendments number 5, file number 1601-01221. The Planning Act requires in section 3412 that before passing a zoning bylaw amendment, council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect to this amendment. The purpose of this public meeting is to receive comments and answer questions from the public regarding the amendment to the Township of West Lincoln zoning bylaw. We stress that no decision has been made on this proposed amendment, and any comments received will be taken into account by council in their consideration. The Planning Act also requires under section 3413 that council advise the public that if a person or public body does not make any oral submissions at the public meeting or make any written submissions to the Township of West Lincoln before the bylaw is passed, that the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of council for the Township of West Lincoln to the OLT, which is also known as the Ontario Land Tribunal. So at this time, I'm going to ask the deputy clerk to please advise the method and dates by which notice of the public meeting was given.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Proper notice was given by way of advertising in the local newspaper on August 5th, 2021.
Excellent. Thank you. Will Planner 2, Garrett Borma, please explain the purpose and reason for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment?
Thank you, Councillor Riley. The Township of West Lincoln is undertaking an additional round of housekeeping amendments, this time specifically regarding housing types. Over the last 2 years, the township has received 2 applications for draft plan of subdivision and zoning amendment that includes housing types not fully contemplated in the township zoning bylaw. These housing types are back-to-back townhouses and stacked back-to-back townhouses. A back-to-back townhouse unit is essentially a townhouse unit that, in addition to a shared sidewall or shared sidewalls, shares a rear wall. This results in a block of townhouse units that don't have side yards or rear yards. While these may not often seem desirable, they are often being proposed in lieu of mid-rise apartment buildings, which typically don't have much yard space or amenity space either. Stacked back-to-back units typically are units that also share a common floor ceiling, as well with 1 or 2 units stacked on top of each other. The township has initiated this review in place to set in place standard zoning regulations for back-to-back units and stacked back-to-back units, as opposed to having the developers create their own specific regulations on a site-by-site basis. Staff also note that when considering back-to-back units and stacked back-to-back units, the importance of having nearby parks and amenity areas for these types of units, as well as the appropriate amount of parking spaces. Other considerations being made are the requirement for private balcony space so that each unit has a limited amount of outdoor space that they can take advantage of. Draft provisions have been provided in the report and the agenda this evening. However, since they were drafted, planners both acting on behalf of the PBUD developments, which is draft plan approved, and the Mars Homes Thrive development, which is currently under review. Planners from both of those developments did submit comments, which staff are going to review along with any other public comments that we received this evening. We will review those comments and then incorporate them into the draft regulations that we have in the report. So just want to emphasize that those are draft at this moment and we're still reviewing them. The region of Niagara has provided comments. They do not object to the township's proposed zoning amendment, but would just like to see the final details of the zoning amendment. So once all agency and public comments have been received and reviewed, staff are recommending that a recommendation report be prepared and presented at a future committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Garrett. I'm going to ask now the room here, are there any oral written submissions for anyone present on the Zoom meeting regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? I would like to stress that this may be the only public meeting held with respect to the application. Therefore, if there's any members of the public that are currently present at this in attendance at this zoning public meeting, Zoom public meeting, we'd like to make their comments now or provide written comments. They should do so now by using one of the 2 options. One, if you're using a computer or smartphone, you're going to raise your hand, which can be found in the Zoom display below. Or two, if you're using a landline or telephone, you're going to dial *9, and that will notify our staff that you have a question or comment. Once you've been acknowledged to speak, please unmute your microphone, and it is also important that you provide your comments now. And if you have not done so already in writing or verbally, as the OLT, I find that a little bit harder to say for some reason than LPAT, OLT may not consider comments made during any other council and or committee meeting. Also, anyone wishing to speak are required to unmute their microphone to talk. And once they're finished, we do ask that you mute your microphone again. And prior to speaking, please provide your name and address for the record. I already see one hand up. So I'm going to go to I'm going to permit this person to talk here. So I don't have a name. I just have a phone number here. So I'll let them introduce themselves. If you can hear me, you're going to unmute your phone there. And you should be good to go. Here, I'll push a button here. Oh, okay.
Mr. Chair, it's Albert Witteveen at 2853 South Grimsby Road 7. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Garrett, on these back-to-back townhouses through the zoning bylaw, will there be a percentage of these, and how may that be controlled in a development? I think they're a good idea, but you know, how many is good, and so my concern is that we don't want to end up with one large development with all back to back. So I'm wondering what through you, Mr. Chair, to Garrett, what planning staff is proposing as a percentage of this type of product in a proposed subdivision development.
So go ahead, Garrett.
Yeah, through the chair, thank you, Councillor Witteveen, for that comment. So two thoughts on that. The first thought is what we have drafted in our proposed zoning bylaw is a separate medium density residential zone, an RM4 zone, which would only permit back-to-back units as well as stacked townhouses. And then secondly to that is in the higher level planning documents, such as secondary plans or official plans, they would designate areas of low density, medium density, and high density. And typically these back-to-back units fall within the medium and high density unit per hectare densities. I don't believe they would be able to fall, just for the nature of the unit, they wouldn't be able to fall into the low density. So I don't believe we have anything proposed as a percentage of units across the site, but we will aim to control that through secondary plans and official plans. And I think Brian also has unmuted, so he might have some additional thoughts on that as well.
If I may, Mr. Chair, just to add to what Garrett has said, the other piece of the puzzle is the fact that the zoning will only exist on lots and properties as we put it in place through council. So you'll have control at the planning process and through a committee and council approval. And, you know, we have two applications, as Garrett alluded to, and beyond that, it'll be site plan or subdivision by subdivision stage, and we can regulate it that way.
Thank you. Albert, was there anything else you wanted to ask?
No, just thank you, Garrett and Brian, for that clarification.
Excellent. Thank you, Albert. I'm going to look back through the room here to see if there's any other comments or questions. Oh, I see another one. So let me just move some stuff here. All right. So Jared, you're welcome to, you're already permitted in the room, so you're welcome to speak to this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I started talking there and was off to a good start, and no one could hear me.
I apologize. I actually thought I clicked it and I clicked the other one, so that's my fault.
That's all right. I like the sound of my voice. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's Jared Marcus from IBI Group. As Mr. Borman noted, we've provided some written comments about the draft guidelines. We're very supportive of the township's initiative here to recognize a newer type of housing in the township, but something that IBI groups worked with a lot in Stony Creek, Hamilton, Grimsby, and Beamsville. So it is a very common building form that is coming out to the West Niagara Way. So we're supportive of the initiative. We provided our comments, which were kind of around, ensuring that the guidelines were taking into consideration the built form that we're seeing in these other municipalities instead of coming up with something brand new. So our comments have been provided, and again, we're just happy to see this initiative moving forward.
Thank you, Jared. I'm gonna look back through the room here to see if there's any other comments or questions. Seeing, I'll give you a couple more seconds here. Okay, we're gonna move forward. So at this point, I'm going to ask members of committee, do any members of committee have any oral written submissions on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? Please note that members of committee must make their comments now, as Ontario Land Tribunal may not consider comments made at any other council in our committee meeting. Any member of council/committee wishing to speak are required to unmute their microphone to talk, and then once they're finished, we will ask that you mute your microphone again. So any members of committee who would like to, I've got Councillor Ganan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Although this is the second meeting, my comments are similar to the first one. I think in our first meeting tonight, we provided an opportunity for a very type of housing, and certainly this does the same. We know that we are seeing these types of developments, types of housing, various price points in that housing coming into other communities. And I think it's time that we were also looking at this in West Lincoln. We know that there is a great need for various types of housing and various price points. And this is an excellent step to be ready for that moving forward. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor. So I got a notice saying there's a question in the, oh, that's over here. So we have a question here. So I don't know if I should read the question. I think I'll see if I can unmute the individual here. Let's see. So it's Lillian. That way she can. So Lillian, I gave you permission to talk here. If you can unmute your microphone, I'm gonna just give your name and address, and then go ahead with your question. I'll let you kind of bring it back here. I didn't see that earlier.
Hello, I'm from 31 Catalina Drive. I don't know if you could hear me. I'm having a little bit of difficulty listening on my iPhone without my ear pods.
Okay, we can hear you.
I just asked if lot 4 could be considered as a different type of subdivision.
Okay, so maybe go to Brian.
Young and South Grimsby Road 16.
Okay, our director will respond. Just in 1 second.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Josick and I have spoken in the past. I think I saw that she had called me today, but I didn't get a chance to catch up with her yet. I believe her interest is actually more to do with the Hamlet report that's coming up a little bit later on the agenda, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
So,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think we could perhaps speak to Fulton at that point if Lillian wants us to.
Yeah, so
thank you. Thank you.
That we'll come back once we get out of the public meeting here. I was still trying to figure out what you're talking about with lot 4. That we'll have a chance for you to ask any items on the agenda, and I'll make a note just to prompt you in case you missed that cue there, but that'll be the best time to bring that up. So thank you, Lillian.
Thank you.
So, all right, so one last time, I'm gonna go members of committee. Nothing, I don't see any other, I'll just bring this up again, make sure we're giving everyone a fair shot here to ask their questions. Not seeing any other hands up, so I'm going to go forward and say, please advise that a technical report is being considered by a committee this evening, and that a recommendation report will be forthcoming to a future committee in our council meeting. Once committee and or council has made a decision with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment, and if approved by council, a notice of its passing will be circulated with an appeal period. If you wish to be notified of council's decision, please ensure that you email the township clerk, Joanne Shime, at jshime@westlincoln.ca. Anyone who is also interested in observing any council and or committee meetings, discussions about a particular bylaw should not solely rely on any mailed notices, thus accidentally miss the opportunity to attend an applicable meeting. It is suggested that you should watch the township website for a posting of agendas to review the items that will be discussed at a council and or committee meeting. The agendas for meetings are posted on the township website at 4 p.m. on Friday prior to the meeting. Additionally, meeting schedules are also noted on the township website for public to view. If you wish to receive notices by email, it is suggested that again that you contact the clerk's office to advise them of this request and include your email along with your mailing address and a phone number. So with this public meeting with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, I'm going to conclude it at the hour of 6:54 p.m. And then as I move over, I'm just going to confirm with my deputy clerk here that she has all that and we're ready to proceed forward. So Jessica, are we good to proceed with the rest of the meeting here?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. So at this point, we're going to move forward to change in order of items on the agenda. So I'm going to look around members of committee here. Are there any items we need to change? Are we good to proceed? I see that we're good to proceed. So we have a few appointments this evening. Item P8321, Kevin Hunick, Executive Director, Current Christian School, upcoming building project for the school itself, and we have a PowerPoint presentation. I'll also read the recommendation right now that may come out of that, which is that correspondence be received from Kevin regarding the upcoming building project from the Current Christian School, dated September 13th, 2021, be received, and we'll have to decide how we want to proceed after that. So at this point, Kevin, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair, and it's a delight to be with all of you, the directors, staff, and counselors. Yeah, greetings from Karen Christian School. We're in a similar storm as you, and I imagine it's a challenge to operate during these times. So I just want to acknowledge as well your efforts to continue going. It's great to see the students back in class, and I just shared with our community it's a great mix of both calm and joy in our buildings right now. So it's exciting to be back in person. I don't know if there's the slide deck prepared, if that will be served up on your end or if it's on my end.
We normally ask you to do it. I believe we should, I'll confirm with IT that we've given you the ability to share your screen. So Roberta, is Kevin able to share his screen with us?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. And bear with me as I find my presentation button.
Would it be under slideshow?
Yeah, it's hidden by my, it's hidden, but there we go. Would you believe I used to be in IT? Probably not. So yes, just a presentation on our Building the Way campaign. Some of you will know that Karen Christian School does have a prominent presence here in Smithville, in the township of West Lincoln, with our property on Town Line Road. But we have a second school down in Stony Creek on Highway 8, both rebranded as Karen Christian School a few years ago. Karen Christian School, we provide a faith-based education, instructional excellence for students from JK to 8. Right now we're at over 450 students serving many denominations, and our span reaches as far as Welland and Waynfleet over to Caister, East Hamilton, Stony Creek, and as far east as Vineland. So it's quite the swath. You might see our buses out and about as you traverse the township. With that growth and hearing your business earlier, it's exciting to hear about growth in the area, and we're certainly feeling it in our school. With 3 portables out behind our building in Smithville, we are at absolute max capacity at this point. So over the past 65 years, we've educated thousands of students. This is not new to us, but right now our current facilities really just don't meet the steadily growing enrollment as we see the demographic in the area expanding as well. It's anticipated that that next year we will probably break that 500 student mark over both campuses. Even amidst the pandemic, it seems that there's an appetite for the education that we're providing, and we're absolutely thrilled by that, as you can imagine. The Smithville campus, if you've had the chance to visit, it was built at a time when kindergarten was a single classroom 3 days a week, and over the years, as we've expanded our early years programs, we are now at a point where we're running a junior and senior kindergarten class both 5 days a week. This year, we've had to split that into a third class, and as I said before, we're spilling out of all corners. So back 2 years ago, we saw this coming and started a rather ambitious capital campaign to raise money for both debt reduction, an addition and renovation to the facility in Smithville, and then some capital needs down in Stony Creek. Our plan here in Smithville, as you can see in this drawing or rendering, involves a 4-classroom addition and then some significant renovations to the interior or to the entryway, focusing on changing pedagogies, so allowing us to teach in with the best research available. So you're beginning to see a lot of project-based learning, group work, kids that are needing smaller spaces to consult and work together. We'd also like to make our entryway a little more inviting to parents and passersby, but then also some focus on special needs. And we've certainly seen that in our current facility. When I arrived about 5 years ago, we employed, I think, 2 paraeducators, and this year we have 10 in the building to focus on the special needs that we have specifically in the classrooms. And as well, you can imagine enhanced security and accessibility are always a focus. So the plans underway are also taking a look at the accessibility requirements so that we can serve more students with more diverse needs. But that we can also run a secure facility and ensure the kids are safe while learning. Over the years, I ask my community this frequently. I ask them, if we were to disappear tomorrow, would anybody notice? And I'm not one to answer that question. It's one that I would rather ask out to our community. Would you notice? Would the people in the room notice if we disappeared suddenly? And we hope that the answer to that question is a resounding yes, based on the impact that we have on our community. And I've just listed a few here that we've attempted to make sure that we are not a facility that is a drain on resources to our community, but one that gives back in spades. And notably for the Smithville campus, the West Lincoln Memorial Hospital projects have been a focus, not only from a support perspective, but also raising money. In 2019, we were recognized as the Philanthropist Organization of the Year by that body, based on the funds raised by our students over the years. And the kids, the learning that the kids do through these initiatives, of course, is my focus. I want to make sure that these kids are doing real work that meets a real need, that impacts real people. And this is bearing out not only in their community outreach work, but it's also starting to bear out in some of the pedagogies that we're following. Partnering with Foodland at Thanksgiving drives and so on, we've become known by a number of businesses in our community as probably Cairn Christian School can help us out on this, and that's the type of impact that we want to continue to have, and we want to continue to grow our impact. As well, our space, we try as much as possible to make this not a no trespassing space, but please come and use our space after hours and during the weekends. Please respect it based on the volunteer hours that go into maintaining and providing it. but nothing delights us more than to see the community out and using our facilities. A number of you have made use of our ice rink when the weather cooperates on those, but certainly our playground equipment, the soccer fields, and some relaxation space. COVID has given us opportunity to take our learning outside, and if you take a walk around the building, you'll see a number of outdoor classrooms that have suddenly become relaxation areas for people too. And I'm actually quite thankful that those areas are being treated with respect. We don't see a lot of vandalism in those areas, so I would say it's working, and we're thankful to the community for that. And then as well, some rental spaces. As rental space becomes an issue when some larger boards, it's difficult for them to monitor and to offer rental space, and we're able to monitor a little closely. So sports clubs, churches, music and drama companies are able to rent our space as well. So it's not simply educational space, it's space that gets used for other things in the community. I've shared with you a little bit about the best practices and unique pedagogies. This is the other area that Cairn Christian School has been a leader, where we've hosted an annual workshop for educators from across Ontario, from as far away as Ottawa and Pickering, Barrie, and Sarnia, where we gather them together and instruct them on best practices to enhanced learning and do exactly what I had mentioned earlier, pursue learning that meets a real need for real people. The employment impact as well of Cairn Christian School, I did a count just recently, and we're up over 60 between the two campuses. We're always looking for bus drivers, so any ears to the ground for bus drivers. I have some current openings, and if anyone wants to put in extra hours on a second job, I'm certainly willing to take a look at that. But beyond that, administrators, custodial contractors, and of course our educational staff. The building, of course, is not lost on us that that the work that we need done will have a local economic impact. Our regular maintenance and facilities already has that as we patronize local businesses to ensure that we have clean and well-performing facilities. But the expansion as well will keep our economy rolling in this area, especially during this difficult time. This project budget, our Building the Way campaign is a $3.2 million budget. So if we strip away some of our debt reduction and Stony Creek projects, I have here just a preliminary budget where the building committee is actually meeting this evening in my absence and just reviewing some of the drawings. It's been, this budget was prepared 3 years ago. And we're finding, much to our delight, that we're able to hold the budget at this level. So with the addition and renovation itself, $2.1 million, it should be FF&E, so furniture, fixtures, and equipment that will go into those spaces. Fees and permits, of course. Our building committee has begun the permitting process with the township. And then the two items that come to our ask today, the municipal and the regional development charges. I have similarly reached out to the Niagara region to begin discussions on whether or not there's some leeway to have some development charges waived and or reduced. And while it seems insignificant at less than 1%, a $21,000 addition to our budget is a number of fewer donors where we go out to our community and can say, actually, we're partnering with the township on this project, not just executing within its bounds. And this is where our campaign, the hard work is starting to come to light. We're getting close to a public phase. Planning is getting to a point where we're going to throw the doors wide open. But up until now, the 26 volunteers and really thousands of volunteer hours have gone into approaching local donors within our community, and they've answered with their enthusiasm. 190 gifts. So we are closing in on that point. My board for the school has given a target of 90% of funds pledged and raised before we can put a shovel in the ground. And this work continues into, despite possible fourth wave and despite the challenges that COVID has, we continue to pound the pavement, as it were, and to go to our supporting community to reach out for their support for this project. So our timeline, stepping back from 2019, we engaged an architect, and our community assessment was conducted. Wayne Skilstra, many of you know, the realtor locally, joined as our campaign chair. Andrew Van Geest began with our building committee this past summer, and currently our drawings are being engineered. So the permitting process will continue with the cooperation of the West Lincoln Township staff and our building committee, and we hope late this fall to begin construction. And of course, the hope and the dream here is that September of next year that we open the doors to an expanded and renovated facility. And this is where I come to you as a township, and we're wondering if you can partner with us. The picture here is our board chair, Josie DeGraff, about to hand the shovel over to Andrew Van Geest, who's ready to put it in, but we're almost there, but not quite. And wondering if the direct ask here is that the township would consider waiving the development fees referred to in our budget at the municipal level. Would they waive the fees so that we can get closer to our goal of 90% of 3.2 million and to get these projects underway? So again, thank you for the time to present. I hope you read from me and from my voice how excited I am about the projects, how excited about and how much I love these schools, and how much I believe in the impact that they have, not only on the kids and the families that are enrolled here, but on our community. So I just invite your questions, your comments, and anything else you would have from me.
Excellent. Thank you, Kevin. And so just to remind committee here, we do have a recommendation that will need a mover and a seconder. But before we get into that, I don't know if there's any specific questions or comments members of the committee would like to ask first before we put that on the table. I see Mayor Bilsma.
Great. So, Mr. Huning, thank you very much for your presentation. Certainly, I would like to answer in the affirmative that you would be missed in our community after so many years. It is a real blessing to have, quote unquote, the bottom end of our municipality held up by both your school and what SDCH, for example, does, for the community and their impacts. I know that, watching you grow as our town grows means, we have a vibrant community. So you would be missed. The other thing that I just wanted to say is, always very supportive of this. I don't know in particular the protocols, and I'm sure we're going to hear from staff a little bit later. In my 6 years on council, I don't think we've done a direct waiving of development charges, and of course, it becomes a bit of a perennial problem. Because those are, a form of fees paid for services that are existing and for the growth in those services. And so it de facto becomes, a donation at the expense of all the taxpayers of the community. And of course, we have to be sensitive to the bottom line of the budget that we are responsible for. So I know that you understand the sensitivity. So just kind of getting that on the record. So that we're, the public is also aware that, we understand that our budget is very important to us, and the taxpayers are very important to us. And it's always a little bit sensitive to kind of say that, because you know, it seems like we're giving and taking away at the same time. But we are very supportive of Karen. So my recommendation is that we
Did you want to, Mr. Mayor, did you want to wait till we actually put that on the table? Because it's not
Oh,
actually on
okay.
the
I
table.
thought
right now.
I technically
No.
kind of thought it was. So
I was just giving you a
was gonna-
chance to ask any questions directly to Kevin before we did that. If we can put it on the
Yeah.
table, I just need a mover and seconder.
Yeah. Okay. Well, when the time comes, I'll let around questions go around, and then when the time comes, we'll put it on the floor, and then I'll just put a simple amendment on there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Yeah.
Any other comments from committee members? I got Councilor Radrick and then Councilor Ganan.
Thank you very much, Chair. I agree with the mayor. The school would be missed if it was no longer present in our community. I've never had the opportunity to walk through the doors of the school. However, just walking through the outdoor space over the last year and a half, especially during the pandemic, it's evident of the embracing of the various pedagogies in the outdoor classroom spaces, and the community spirit by allowing the community openly come in and use the skating opportunities when the ice was solid enough over our past winter. Certainly looking forward to hearing recommendations from staff going forward about what, if anything, can be provided. But I did want to make a comment that from a fellow educator that what I see from the outside is a school that allows a diverse, perhaps educational opportunity to various people from our community, and would love to see it continue and flourish for sure. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Ganan.
Okay, thank you, Kevin, for your presentation. Karen is very valuable to our community. However, I think I have to sort of look to the mayor in terms of sending this back in some way to have staff look at it. I guess my first question, if I could, to Mr. Treble would be, have we ever done such a thing before? We've had other expansions. We've had, the change from College Street, for example, to from high school to elementary school. The Christian high school has made some changes. Have we been involved in that in any way before?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have been involved in a number of other school adjustments or changes in the past, let's say 15 years. And in those cases, certain fees I know were charged. I'm not aware that any were waived, but I only saw this presentation on Friday for a first. So I'm not familiar, through you, Mr. Chair, with how the charges were actually calculated. And I feel I'd be more qualified in responding and giving better guidance if the matter was perhaps referred to staff, if that was the preference of the committee. So that we can look into the actual fees and confirm if they're in fact accurate, or if there are slight variations to the fees that would result. So we can certainly bring back a more fulsome understanding, but I don't think I can do it justice tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Treble. I appreciate that honest answer. So, Councillor, we've all had an opportunity to speak on that. I think you might want to speak to it, but if not, Mr. Chair, I'd be willing to make that motion with the addition of and refer to staff at the end of it where the ... dots come.
Okay, I might as well just put it on the table right now since we kind of got around it anyway. So I got Councilor Ganan moving it. I have Mayor Bylsma seconding it. So this is now we can actually speak to it if there's any specific questions. Mayor Bylsma, before I come to you, I'm just going to make a quick comment here. I agree basically with everything that's said there. I think coming into this, I met with Kevin, he gave me a bit of a tour there and get a real feel for what the inside was like, and and the community that was established there. My kids don't go to that school by any means, but you could tell the minute you step in, it's just filled with love and joy. Like, this is such an incredible thing that we have in our community. I know that's a little different because it's not like a publicly funded school in any capacity. And for me, schools are a little bit soft spot. I certainly take pride in all of our schools, and if there's anything we can do to help, I'd love to see that be possible. And so my hope, even thinking as we hear things unfold, was that this could hopefully be referred to staff and see if maybe it's not a complete waiving. If I know there's probably concerns of even precedent that could be set. If there's a partial working somewhere in the middle, I'm sure anything would be welcomed. But yeah, I want to thank Kevin again for coming and making that presentation and kind of really giving us that feel for what they're all about. And they would, without, I think we all mentioned already, but I think without hesitation, you would be dearly missed if you weren't in our community. So at this point, I'll go back to Mayor Bylsma if Mayor Bylsma wishes to go forward with whatever the question was he had.
Yeah, so I think what is typically done, and staff can correct me, but generally speaking, it's not net in the development charges that are waived that we may consider some kind of support, but it would be in the form of a grant. I believe that's a little bit more consistent and I guess a little bit more upfront. So I think that's what will end up happening. I'm probably going to defer to Madam CAO for an answer on that. Is that generally speaking more of the possibility?
Thank you. Through you, Chair Riley, to Mayor Bylsma. Interesting discussion, and my experience has been in other municipalities that I've worked in is when there is a sort of a request for a waiving. It has to actually, we have to actually look to see whether it's even allowed. But if that happens, what's the impact on the rest of the taxpayers? So it is, you're really asking for some assistance, and I think that's the question that has to be raised in terms of the mechanism.
Yeah, so I was kind of like my thought behind, and instead of kind of referring that back to staff so that they could prepare that report and have a full understanding of what we can even do if there's anything at all, whether that's, as Councillor Mayor Bylsma mentioned, donation of some capacity, or if that's a waiving, if there's lots of research that needs to be done here. So I think we just need a direction from someone to refer this to staff, and I think at that point there's really not too much more we can really say to it until we have all the specifics before us, and also confirmation. I know we were given numbers there. I'm assuming those numbers are probably pretty accurate, but in the event that things should change, once our director gets a chance to kind of look through it as well, there might be some areas where there could be some tweaks. Who knows? Maybe not. I don't want to get anybody's hopes up, but I think it's best I leave it in staff's hands at this point. If a member of committee would like to make that right now, as I can't make it as chair, but if a member of committee can make that, that'd be great. So I'm going to go to Kevin. Sorry, I know you got your hand up in the chair. I'll come right to you, or Councilor Ganel, I'll come right to you.
Just a quick comment to Mr. Treble. The development charges are there as an estimate by our architect, Jason Brower, who I know works with the township fairly closely on other projects. So I do believe they're fairly close, but again, what they would actually be, that would have to be refined, obviously. And then a comment back to Councillor Broderick. Don't just drive by. You're welcome to come for an in-school visit anytime. You have my contact information. I'd love to host you, or Joyce Corney, our principal, would be happy to take you inside to have a better look than just a PowerPoint. So,
thank you, Councilor Ganel.
I was just ready to make the motion.
Okay, so the motion is going to be to refer that back to staff.
Yeah. Do you need to read the entire thing?
So I'll read it.
Be received. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll read it. Sorry, let me just bring it up here again. All right, so that correspondence received by Kevin Hunick regarding the upcoming building project for Carnegie School, our Christian school, dated September 13th, be received, and that it be referred back to staff. I guess just referred to staff. Do we need any more clarification? Staff kind of know what we're looking for. So okay, we'll just have it as referred to staff. So I have a mover and second. I believe our original mover was Councillor Ganel, and our second was Mayor Bylsma. I'm not seeing any other questions or comments, so I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Okay, and so that passes unanimously. So thank you, Kevin. That concludes at least your portion of it. You're welcome to stay and watch the rest of the meeting if you got nothing else going on, but we're going to move forward to the next appointment there. I imagine you're a pretty busy guy, but no pressure.
Thanks so much for the opportunity again. I am going to respectfully bow out and feed my children.
Oh, no worries.
Thanks so much again. I appreciate it.
All right, so we're going to move to item P8421, Steve Weaver, Planning Consultant, Urban Boundary Expansion, Urban Boundary Expansion, PowerPoint presentation. And it says under here in a side note to refer to item P92-21, Staff Report PD 105-2021. So right now, do we have, I'm assuming Steve, is he here? Oh, I see. Sorry, Brian, you can go forward there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Weaver did indicate to the deputy clerk and I that he may be delayed because he had another presentation
Okay,
first.
so
I think I did share that with you, Mr.
you
Chair.
did. Sorry, I thought that was, I had them backwards. So what we'll do is we'll park this. We'll give him a
Yeah,
little bit
'cause
more time.
I don't think he's here yet, from what I can tell.
I don't see. I'll go to the other side in case. Sorry, just scroll through here. If you're here, feel free to raise your hand. Otherwise, I don't see him on this side here. So what we'll do is we'll just kind of step over this for a second. We'll go to item 8521, Dan Curry, MHBC Planning Limited, Rural Employment Lands, Settlement Area Expansion Options, and there's a PowerPoint presentation on that as well. So Dan, welcome back. Always a pleasure to see you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wasn't sure whether Mr. Treble was going to make some opening comments, so I'll maybe look to him if he is, or to just wave me on if he's not.
Perhaps, Mr. Chair, just the one thing to put on the floor for the entire committee and the public. I think a lot of members of the gallery are here for Steve and Dan's presentations, and they are very important to the future of the township as we prepare for growth, especially in light of the province's instructions that the region and the township figure out what we want to do to grow to the year 2051. So some 30 years of growth that we're trying to plan for. So Dan is here to talk about the rural hamlet review work that he's doing, including the rural employment work that is attempting to find locations for non-agricultural businesses in the countryside so that we can direct those uses to someplace, mainly those uses that don't require sewer and water services, and therefore Smithville doesn't necessarily make sense for them. Steve's presentation is focused more on Smithville and the urban boundary piece there. The other piece, just to put on the table, and I know both of our presenters are going to speak to this as well, we encourage feedback and comment now. In October, we've been asked to bring forward what we think the boundaries of all of these various settlement areas should look like. So in October, you're going to see a recommendation report from staff, probably with input from Dan and Steve again, just to recommend boundaries. We're not going to get into the details of what those internal workings would necessarily be like now. The region just needs to know the boundary for both Smithville and the hamlets. And the good news about that, Mr. Chair, if I can just throw this on the table as well, is by putting boundaries on the table now, giving them to the region and getting a sense of whether or not the region is supportive, that then allows us to proceed forward with the detailed servicing and transportation analysis and all of that, knowing what the future urban boundary might look like, putting all of that work in place, and then finding out afterwards that the boundary isn't as we first envisioned would seem kind of backwards. So this way actually does make some sense that we get some support for our boundary, and then we drill down in terms of how to develop internal to that and our phasing strategies over 30 years, et cetera. So in some respects, the presentation by Steve Weaver in advance of Dan's made sense, but Dan was alerted today to the fact that he may have to go first. So here we are. So Dan, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Treble. And then to staff, I do have a PowerPoint presentation. What's the protocol here? You bring it up or I bring it up?
You'll bring it up for us. If you should be able to share your screen there.
Okay. I'm always able, but I'm always willing, but whether I'm able or not, let me just see here. You think after a year and a half of Zoom meetings, I'd get good at it, but.
Something's happening.
Okay, Mr. Chair, can you see the screen? It looks like a slide presentation.
I can, sir.
Okay, thank you. Then I've done it right. Okay, thank you. And with Brian's introduction, my component to the work that we're assisting the township with is to look at the options for expansions to the hamlet settlement areas, given the need for greater rural employment lands. And so the purpose of my presentation is really to provide committee with an update. And as Brian said, provide an opportunity for council members to provide comments or questions, give us some thoughts as we're starting to wrap up this project. So what I'll do is, quite briefly really, address number 2, 3, and 4, talk about what the purpose of the project is in a little more detail, and then give you an overview of how we're going about it, and then more particularly what the preliminary findings are and what our next steps will be. So the purpose, if you distill it right down, is to determine what the best locations are for expansion to one or more of the hamlet settlement areas. As you know, there's 15 different hamlet settlements outside of Smithville. And what are the best locations to expand, to be able to accommodate rural employment uses? So a specific type or component of the overall employment within the township. And this is really for 2 reasons. One, the wider growth management exercise that's going on at the regional level, and then of course is being considered at the township. Growth to 2051 and the best way to accommodate that. But there's also another component, which is over the last several years, the township has experienced increased pressure on agricultural designated lands for industrial uses that don't comply with the agricultural policy and zoning. So it's really a 2-step process that we're going, that this study is organized in 2 steps. And the first is to determine what the overall demand is. How much land does the township need for rural employment? And so part of that is really the region has done a lot of the growth analysis work and given us some direction. And then again, over the last few years, townships bylaw enforcement records. So these industrial uses that have occurred or are occurring or trying to occur maybe on agricultural lands. And then the second step is, okay, where is the best opportunity to? So we've assessed all the hamlets in a preliminary way at this point, and then it's ultimately to make a recommendation. So in terms of the demand, this little chart that's on this page is straight out of the region's land needs assessment. And so what they've identified is that employment growth, rural employment growth, from now till 2051 will grow by approximately 570 jobs. And the expectation is that about half of that employment growth should occur or be directed to the hamlet settlement areas. The typical density of this type of employment is about 11 jobs per hectare, which is really low in terms of employment. And that simple mathematical calculation spits out at the end that translates into about 26 hectares of land needs. And my statement here, the total land area forecast, that's actually a misprint. It should say the minimum land area forecast for rural employment is 26 hectares. So if we just take what the region has said in terms of need to accommodate growth, make the assumption of 50% should be accommodated in hamlet areas, we need at a minimum 26 hectares of additional land. And that's also based in part on some of the regional analysis, which is the average size of this type of employment parcel is 2 hectares. Many of them are larger. And there really is very little vacant land within the hamlets in general, but of these types of parcels. And then once you start to apply some locational analysis, really there is no availability within the existing hamlets. The other piece of information that the township has provided is some of the data from the bylaw enforcement. So over the last few years, there's been several incidents where there are uses being established on agricultural parcels, usually farms, and they are not agricultural uses. So this is a sample of that, approximately 39. And the type of use, not agricultural or agricultural related, and the land area associated with each. That the point to be made here is there's a number of them. They tend to be mostly contractor yards, things like that. The total land area, 518 hectares, that's a bit of an overstatement. It is just a sum of the land area of each of those parcels. but a number of these parcels, the actual manufacturing contractor's yard use is only on a portion of it. The balance of it is being farmed. So the 518 is a bit of an overstatement. And the other piece of information that's we've been looking at that's useful to us is, so here's the map of the township, the settlement areas, sorry, the hamlet settlement areas are shown in yellow. And those stars represent some of the locations that are shown on that previous chart. And the one piece of information still from that is that most of the demand, or where these non-agricultural, rural employment, rural industrial uses want to locate, is in the northerly portion of the hamlet, or sorry, northerly portion of the township. And that's for a couple of reasons. They're primarily spillover from the larger urban centers where they're being priced out of Hamilton. These are contractors' yards or other type of uses that they need a lot of land. And it's expensive to locate these type of uses in industrial parks or industrial zone land. And so it's closer to the urban areas and also well served by some of the major roads within the township. And there's considerably fewer in the southerly part of the township. So we know that on a locational basis, that's where the demand wants to be. So we've undertaken a screening analysis and started to move on to where are the best locations for potential hamlet expansions for employment uses. And there's 3 sets of criteria that are summarized on the screen. And all settlement boundary expansions, have to comply with the criteria that's set out in both the provincial growth plan, and then those criteria are mirrored in the regional official plan and the township official plan. And so you have to avoid a number of areas. So any expansion to a settlement area has to avoid natural heritage systems, floodplains and hazard lands, avoid converting prime agricultural areas, and avoid mineral aggregate areas. So that's the constraints analysis. Really should avoid, the best locations are those that avoid conflict with those land uses. The locational employment attractors, these are the pull factors. Industrial lands, they're going to be best suited if they can take advantage of the existing transportation infrastructure. And then, as I mentioned, it appears that there's also the proximity to the northern part of the township, which is a pull factor. And then lastly, one of the other set of criteria are the land use compatibility. So we're talking about a form of industrial use, and so both the provincial guidelines as well, these are again mirrored in regional and township policy to a certain extent, is that you want to make sure that it's compatible with adjacent residential uses. And I think, as council knows, most of the land within each of the hamlet settlement areas is primarily residential uses. So we have to look at those criteria as well. So I'll take you through just an example. So we've run all of the various hamlet settlement areas through this screening analysis. And I've selected one, Grassy, just as a for example, so you can understand sort of how that method works. So on this particular slide, we're showing the environmental constraint areas, and the settlement areas outlined shows up kind of as a pale yellow on my screen, but that's the existing settlement area. For Grassy, it's really irregular, actually. But there are no major or any elements of the protected environmental lands. There are some water courses that are close by and a bit of a floodplain area identified in light blue. So very little in terms of the land that is directly adjacent to the settlement boundary and the potential expansion areas. That is constrained by natural features. The agricultural constraints analysis, right off the bat, all of the land within the township, I think, as you know, is prime agricultural land. So there isn't an option here of avoiding prime agricultural lands. So that really comes down to some of the, the differences between the settlement areas is the number of or the amount of agricultural infrastructure that's been in place, such as barns or tile drains, etc. And that barns, we've identified them and show up as dots. So in the case of Grassy, there are some, and that would limit to a certain extent some of the locations that might be available for urban boundary expansion. Mineral aggregate, petroleum aggregates, this is, and petroleum resources rather, this is mapped in the township's official plan. Again, there's at least adjacent to Grassy, no constraints in terms of mineral or petroleum resource, mineral aggregate or petroleum resources. And just in comparison, you can see on this slide, Grimsby Center just happens to be that the identified potential mineral aggregate resource area really surrounds all of Grimsby Center. And then just an example of some of the analysis in terms of compatibility. The yellow and the red are the minimum distance separation that are identified in the provincial guidelines for proximity between industrial uses and sensitive uses such as residential. The yellow is a 300-meter boundary and would really apply to more heavier industrial uses. And for the most part, those are not the rural employment uses, but the red is what would more typically be used as the setback. So you can see that there are residential uses, and so that would have to be one of the things considered in terms of selecting a potential boundary expansion area. So that screening analysis, we've taken all of the applied and analyzed all of the settlement boundaries, all of the hamlet areas and their potential settlement boundary expansions. And an initial screen really is that Grassy, Grimsby Center, Regional Road 12, which is the settlement area at Highway 20 and Regional Road 12, just outside of the Smithville boundary, are really on this broad level, the front runners. Fulton, to a certain extent, is as well, although there are actually more constraints with Fulton than the other three. It's not to say that there aren't opportunities in the other ones, but there's more constraints, as well as the fact they are all of the primary three of Grassy, Grimsby Center, and Regional Road 12 have good transportation access, and all of them are in the northern part of the township. So that's the preliminary conclusions at this part. There is some coordination that's required with the overall expansion analysis to the Smithville area that Steve Weaver will be speaking to, and so we've remained coordinated. But really, our next steps are to do a more detailed analysis. So notwithstanding these are the preliminary conclusions, we have to look at the particular potential for expansion and come to a more refined and direct recommendation. And that will be brought to you shortly later this fall. And we have to continue to coordinate with the master plan. And really what we're trying to achieve with that is to make sure that we're not, the two processes don't double count and make allowances for the same amount of growth, and vice versa, that we don't, our exercise provide a solution that underrepresents the overall need, expecting that the wider Smithville master plan process is going to accommodate it. So we'll continue to coordinate those, and the timing is similar in that the region needs the information from both processes at about the same time later this fall. So with that, I conclude the presentation and turn it back to you, Chair Riley. But with the in terms of the questions, we're really interested if, and I've gone over this fairly quickly, happy to go back in any detail, but really what we want to understand is members of committee, councillor and the mayor, if you have any questions, concerns, or comments on the process to date. But thank you very much, and I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, so I'm going to go to members of committee. I see Mayor Bilsma with his hand up. So Mayor Bilsma, you can go first.
Thank you, Mr. Curry, for your presentation through you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions. The first has to do with kind of existing brownfields, and some of us are, lived here a long time or familiar with some employment lands that are kind of not tied to a particular hamlet, but might be valuable in reaching our targets. And I don't know if there's wisdom in dealing with it, but if I think of Bismarck and the area around Bismarck, of course, probably at one time was a little bit more bustling, but now it looks quite derelict. I think of the kind of the corner, the two corners, one on the west side, but a little bit more on the south and the west of Bismarck. I also think of the old Gainsborough Public Works Yard. I think there's 2 or 3 acres there. Really not useful for anything but, some kind of, so is there a discussion about the town's brownfields to bring that in without, then we could be maybe reach some of those targets without using prime agricultural land, for example. So a consideration of our and they're not big, but they are scattered abroad. So those brownfield considerations.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair Riley. Yes, we're looking at all of it. There are 2 points to consider. One, we have to sort of analyze two strategies in terms of making our recommendations, and sort of broadly put, is it better to make 1 or maybe 2 expansions in 1 or 2 areas that result in a larger parcel that makes it there's some efficiencies to the scale of development if a large area is just brought in one of the hamlets, for example, versus small adjustments to a number of hamlets. So Bismarck, for example, you're absolutely right. There are some lands there that could relatively efficiently be added to the settlement boundary, but there's also a number of constraints in that area which limit it to in some ways to a larger settlement boundary expansion. So we are looking at that. And then the second point is I'd have to look at the mapping for Bismarck, so I don't know if it applies there. But it might, sort of to your general question of there are these other pockets or areas of employment uses. We are bound in terms of the settlement expansion that it has to be a settlement expansion to an existing settlement area. We can't, the growth plan doesn't allow for the creation of new settlements. So it has to be in some way contiguous to an existing settlement boundary. And there are some parcels that are, you could do it, but it's not going to be easy. So that's part of this. And then just as a corollary to that, there's, although it's not part of the work that I'm doing, is that there is a need for settlement boundary expansions that include the residential component as well. So there's a need, or I guess I'll phrase it the other way, there's a lack of available land within the settlement, the hamlet settlement areas for both residential and employment. So it might be that a wider expansion could occur in a place like Bismarck, but it might be residential or any of the other the hamlet settlements as well.
Thank you for that. And I think through Mr. Chair, I'd like to hear from our director. He
has his hand
probably
up.
wants to weigh in there. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the question. Dan has covered off quite extensively the comments. I think as he's indicated, the one key one is we can't create new hamlets as part of this review. But certainly something like the former Gainsborough Public Works Yard property is designated and zoned for non-farm use. So we're in good shape there. but we really can't expand something like that.
Right.
In addition to Dan's presentation, looking at the employment piece, the staff report does touch on some of the other pieces that we have been looking at. You can adjust hamlets based on 3 criteria. There's a technical adjustment that is proposed if we have some misalignment of boundaries, for example. There's a minor rounding out provision that can be applied. And then there's a full-on expansion request. And those have to be carefully thought through. And we have to sort of make sure that we're accommodating the residential and growth or residential growth piece and the employment growth piece. So Dan is focusing on that employment piece because we've always known that we need that. And staff have been kind of doing the residential stuff. And you'll see in the report some of the preliminary thoughts on that. We have specific requests from landowners. And then we also have some thoughts of what staff thinks maybe makes some sense. And the end result next month might be a blending of the two to align with the target number that the region has given us for that kind of growth. And I think it's around something like 20 hectares of rural residential growth that we can accommodate as well in the next 30 years. So it isn't a direct answer, Mr. Mayor, but Bismarck is certainly on our radar as one of the ones we're looking at.
Yeah. And then I have a follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Good.
And that is, so one of the design challenges, let's say, of the little hamlets is they tend to form around a set of crossroads, or maybe it's the intersection of rail, but generally speaking, it's a set of crossroads. And I think of Fulton, Bismarck, although we were talking typically of Grassy or South Grimsby, they tend to form around a crossroads. There's usually a 4-way stop at the center of the hamlet. And I wonder if there's wisdom in reorienting them at this juncture. Some of them are quite small, but if we do an expansion on them, so let's say, for example, we take Fulton being somewhat of a good example of what I'm hoping to propose, and that's we start to develop them off center, which means we don't build out the 4 quadrants around the 4-way stop in kind of an equal sort of way. Fulton, for example, is largely north of Highway 20, and that means that Highway 20 then is relatively safe passage through that hamlet in the sense that it can maintain that kind of 80 kilometers an hour. As soon as we start developing the other 2 corners, then we have to reduce it to 50, and we run into the problem of multiple driveways in that intersection. I think of like one that I'm very familiar with, I drive through all the time, is Camden, where Fly Road has to reduce to 50 kilometers. There's a school zone and those kind of things. If I think of Caister Center, generally off kilter and maybe a good opportunity where we kind of do what I observe a little bit more out west. You drive down a highway and there's one road, it's about half a kilometer long, and then you get to the town center off the main highway, and there's the gas station's kind of along that, and the city forms 4 quadrants kind of off to the side, so you can safely pass this without running through the heart of town. I mean, Smithville struggles with that problem because the main highway runs right through the core of the town, right? And so I'm thinking of like South Grimsby potentially being developed off kilter. I think I'm making the point, but is there wisdom? Is that a consideration?
Through you, Chair Riley. Absolutely. And that's this next phase when I'm talking about some of the detailed analysis. We've done the screening and sort of identified the ones that kind of get knocked out of the park because of some of the policy criteria or other things. But then now looking at the others and some of the others like Bismarck, for example, that I hadn't identified as sort of the primary ones. What are some of those, I'll call them locational specific type criteria, and what makes the best expansion area? And to your point, all of the points you raised are part of that and exactly what we're going to be doing in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. Yeah. No, thank you. As long as you're kind of considering to, it's part of the process. I think that there's a lot of wisdom in that. Thank you. No further, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're going to go to other members of committee. I got Councilor Ganan.
So just a little bit further to what the mayor has said, two of the identified areas in the Grassy and Grassy Center, that area along there, have a border with Grimsby. So does that make it more or less difficult in terms of trying to develop those rural employment areas?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Oh, sorry, Mr. Treble, were you going to answer that?
You go ahead, sir.
My answer was going to be fairly short, which is in terms of the locational criteria, no, we're looking at all of it. I think what it does introduce is if an expansion is directly adjacent to the municipal boundary, for example, then there will be folks potentially across the township line who have an interest in this, and not that participation causes any problems. It's just that's maybe more unique to particularly Grassy and Grimsby Center than it would be some of the other settlement areas.
Yes, I just saw that the two of them sort of have Mud Street right down their border, right? So, thank you.
Go ahead, Director.
Just to add to that, Mr. Chair, the offsetting issue is complicated by a lot of environmental type limitations, and you know, on the Mud Street border, for example, the north side of that road, most of the way is actually greenbelt on the Grimsby side, so that takes away the ability to do anything on that side. And then Fulton, for example, they have some provincially significant wetland limitations that get in the way there, and I don't mean that in a negative way. It just complicates the analysis as was suggested by the mayor and yourself. So there's other pieces of the puzzle. That's why you know, we have to take a little bit more fulsome look at everything before we bring back a recommendation report.
Thank you.
All right. Any other members of committee? Not seeing any. I think we're good there. So thank you, Dan, for your presentation. I think we're going to go to now we'll go up back to item P8421. I saw Steve was in the room there. So Steve, if you want to go forward with your presentation, that would be great as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and my apologies for being a few minutes late tonight, and thank you for reordering your agenda a little bit to accommodate that. I do have a set of slides here that I'll use to assist with the presentation, so I'll just share my screen for a moment.
Thank you.
Just give me a minute. Has that come up okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm pleased to be here tonight to give you some updates on the work that's been completed since our last update to you last December on the Master Community Plan project. And I am here tonight on behalf of the consulting team with ACOM and Wood being the other key team members. And I will say that a lot of the work that's been completed over the last few months on their impact assessments, it's highly technical and it's very extensive. You know, there may be some questions tonight that we would best refer back to them, but I'll do my best as the planner pulling the pieces together to give you some of the highlights of that work. So just in terms of agenda for the presentation, I will try to keep this as short as possible. There's about 7 items we'd like to cover, and of course, hearing back from you as item number 7 at the end of the presentation is our a key agenda item for tonight. I'll kick things off with a bit of an update on the project timeline. So just to recap some of the steps that have been completed or are currently in process. And then last December and in PIC number 1 held in February of this year, there were 2 land use concept options presented for feedback for the future expansion area. And so I'll briefly recap those 2 concepts and the community feedback that we received on those 2 concepts. And then through that feedback, along with further evaluation of the concepts, a preliminary preferred concept plan has been developed. So we've taken it 1 step further with the identification of a first draft of a preferred concept plan that has been the subject of what we refer to as impact assessment, which really means a detailed evaluation, including some modeling of things like servicing and stormwater impacts, traffic impacts, to determine how that concept may be further refined and improved to address the results of that analysis. And then lastly, I'll briefly summarize some of our next steps. And of course, I'm available for questions. So starting off with an update on the project timeline. Really, this process is organized around some logical sequencing of information gathering, review of opportunities and constraints, which has largely been completed in the preliminary phase, and then using that option to develop the options. So in phase one, 2 concept options were developed using those that information gathering to develop those options. And in phase 2, it's really involved the evaluation and impact assessment of a preliminary preferred option. I'll talk a little bit more towards the end of the presentation about the next steps, but phase 3 will get into a recommended preferred plan. So taking the preliminary one and further refining it. We are, at this point, you can see by the yellow star here that we're nearing the completion of phase 2. And then phase 3 is expected to commence in about November of this year, and will run to approximately through the Q1 of 2022. So recapping the previous concepts that were developed for initial evaluation, you've seen these once before, but it has been a while. And these were presented, as I mentioned, at the first PIC or PIC 1 held in February. Just to highlight a couple of the differences between these 2 concepts. Concept 1, which is on the left-hand side of the slide here, focused much of the future residential and what we refer to as community area in the northwest and south parts of Smithville. So the expansion area kind of wraps around the existing community. And the goal of concept 1 is really to try and grow logically from those existing land uses. Employment area was largely focused north and using the hydro corridor as a land use separator in the north and east. Concept 2 looked at it a little bit different, still trying to grow again from the existing land use pattern, but creating a brand new employment area in the southwest. And the reason that was really looked at in concept 2 is that we know that there is an old bypass route for Highway 20 that was identified in the 1970s by the province when it was still a provincial highway. And that bypass would have taken, if it had been built, would have taken traffic on an angle through the west side of Smithville. Here we've shown it continuing along Town Line Road. In fact, the original bypass route continued further south through the south part of the study area. So this was really about aligning an alternative land use option with an alternative transportation route for truck traffic. I failed to mention in presenting concept 1, again, one of the key options looked at as part of that concept is the idea of a northerly truck bypass. So further to the comments earlier tonight about trying to reroute some of the main highway traffic, and in particular heavy truck traffic, around the community and not through the heart of it. Looking at ways to do that was part and parcel of looking at developing these 2 concepts. So there are some other differences among them, but those are really the 2 primary big differences. As I say, we did present that to the community at PIC 1 in February. PIC 1 was really well attended. We had it in a virtual format for obvious reasons. But that really opened up some additional creative ways to have the public participate in the session, and we got some great feedback. So we did have about 130 participants registered for it, and also posted lots of information on the engagement site at plansmithville.ca. So one of the interactive ways that we obtained some feedback through that PIC was through some polling questions, and we asked people about what they were interested in going into the meeting. And the most common answer to that question was they wanted to find out how Smithville will grow into the future and how environmental considerations will be addressed. There was quite a bit of agreement about the need for a truck bypass, so to reroute trucks outside of the core area, and a general preference for routing it to the north instead of creating a new kind of bypass corridor to the south or west. Leaving the meeting, most people were still interested in, again, seeing how Smithville will grow and what its character will be in the future. There were a number of key themes that emerged from the various questions, comments, and written submissions that were received both through the session and following the session. I've captured the 4 main themes here. There are others, but to summarize some of the key priorities and directions that we received back from the participants, small town feel was referenced a lot. Balanced growth, so referring not only to the need for additional housing and jobs, but also all the services and commercial and shopping opportunities and green space that people saw is needed along with that. Land use compatibility identified as very important, and really one of the reasons that it was identified, concept 1 was identified as more preferred than concept 2, was avoiding the creation of 2 separate employment areas. And as I mentioned, there is a general preference identified through that consultation for option number 1 over option 2. The online survey that was posted just before the PIC asked a question about complete community development and what does that mean for Smithville? And what this slide highlights is just some of the key words and phrases that came back through that consultation. You can see the most commonly referred to terms we've highlighted in red font here in the largest font size. So really this goes back to the notion of a complete community having a balanced growth, not only housing and population, but commercial, shopping, restaurants, making sure the supports for that additional population are there with schools and childcare, a lot of emphasis on parks, trails, and green space, recreation facilities, and then of course the jobs aspect with employment and industry. And then in some of the other colors, you see the blue and the green, and then getting into the orange and purple. As the fonts get smaller, there were fewer mentions of those words and phrases. Not that they're less important, it's just that they weren't mentioned as often. But things like having a quiet community, small town feel, again, a common theme, making sure that it's planned and not ad hoc, small business opportunities, accessible and inclusive, a place for families, having the infrastructure to support the growth, quality and appeal. Lots of really good direction and ideas of what complete community means for Smithville from that survey. So that was just a kind of a snippet of the feedback we received. There were a number of other questions that were raised at the PIC to the participants, and then we received that feedback and through the online survey as well. So we considered all of that, as well as some of the early evaluation done by the consulting team, meetings with the landowner group, as well as meetings with township staff in the region in developing a preliminary preferred concept plan. So you can see it is primarily most similar to option 1. The key highlights of this preliminary preferred concept are, firstly, it's framed by the natural heritage system. And so when I refer to the natural heritage system, that's all of the green shaded area that you see on this plan. And it links in not only through the study area, if I can focus in on the study area here. So this is our study area for the expansion, but also throughout the existing Smithville urban area. So this is a provincial requirement. Establishing a natural heritage system is required by the provincial policy statement. And it's not about just protecting features in isolation, but linking them together. So there's been a lot of work done by the Wood team to develop a draft natural heritage system. And we use that as a way to frame the other lands that are available for future land use in developing the preliminary preferred concept. So the majority of the expansion area under this concept, again, I'll just go back to the map that shows just the expansion area. The majority of that area would be for residential neighborhoods. You can see that this would primarily result in 3 new neighborhood areas being created, one to the south, one to the west, and one to the north. And then there's a number of colors shown within that. The lightest color, the yellow, would be the largest land use, which is predominantly low density residential. The orange integrates a mix of both medium density and some small scale neighborhood commercial type uses along key corridors and edges of those communities. And then the red illustrates where the highest densities would be concentrated, really one node roughly in each area, where you'd have almost like a village center. Nothing on the scale of downtown Smithville, and not in an effort to compete with that, but an area where larger scale buildings, smaller low-rise apartments, and mixed use buildings such as ground floor commercial with apartments above would be concentrated, as well as civic uses and community facilities nearby. So each of these circles with a CF is where there might be a school, community center, place of worship, really a key community facility or institution to service that quadrant or area. And then the other main primary type of land use that the expansion area will need to accommodate is what we've referred to as urban employment. And really that refers to mostly fully serviced industrial uses. So again, the 2 primary urban employment areas that have been identified on the concept are to the north. This is the Hydro Corridor here, and this is Industrial Park Road, and to the east. And this is just to the northeast of the East Smithville Secondary Plan, which is here. This is the rail corridor, CPR. I will also highlight that throughout the concept, there have been identified primary road corridors. Which of those corridors would be used as a potential truck route hasn't been readily identified on the concept. That's something being reviewed further through the traffic impact assessment. So there would be a main arterial road through the north part of the study area along the south edge of the Hydro Corridor connecting to Industrial Park Road, and then back to Regional Road 20 in the southeast. One on the west side of town, linking from, again, Regional Road 20 down to Town Line Road, and then continuing from there, looping through the south part of the study area. Those are really the 3 primary road corridors identified. And then, of course, smaller minor collector and local roads identified conceptually within that road network. The last land use area that I'll highlight as part of the preliminary preferred concept is in the northwest. You can see lots of dashed circles in that area. Those represent approximate minimum distance separation arcs from existing livestock facilities. And so as you can see, trying to urbanize that area in the short term would be a big challenge because it's heavily used for livestock operations. And not only within the study area, but with arcs coming in from outside the study area. So that really limits the land use options for that area. What we've conceptually identified here is that that area could be kind of a node of agriculture related employment or industry in the future. It would have to fall within the range of permitted uses that are contemplated by the PPS in the prime agricultural area. So things that are directly related to agriculture. So this is a little bit different, but I think complementary to what Dan's work was looking at for the hamlet areas. This would really try to find a focal point near good transportation infrastructure, near a serviced settlement for ag-related commercial and industrial type uses that serve the farming community. So we are going to work on some refinements, and what we're working on now is some refinements and modifications to the preliminary preferred concept plan. And again, that's driven by the impact assessment and some of the further work that the consulting team has done. Again, the natural heritage system is what we're using to frame the concept plan. And this map I'm sure is pretty hard to see on your screen in terms of any details. But what it does is it breaks out all of the components of the natural heritage system. The solid green areas are the core areas or the most protected features, and they have associated conceptual buffers, so some setbacks from those features where there would be some limitations to development. Linkages are existing open space corridors, so along water courses, the hydro corridor, linking together those core features. And then there is obviously some floodlines associated with 20 Mile Creek, as well as the other water courses in the study area, and those have been incorporated in the natural heritage system as well. The red dots indicate areas of karst topography where there are some hazards associated with that and some setbacks needed for development or special mitigation measures to make sure that that doesn't create any hazardous situations for new development. Headwater drainage features, which are the tributaries and features that feed the water courses, are identified as well. And there are 3 recommended restoration areas in the study area as well. So one between an existing water course or headwater drainage feature and the hydro corridor, one along 20 Mile Creek in this location, and one refilling with natural landscape the formerly wooded area in the middle of this U-shaped woodlot. So to simplify that, and so you can see it a little bit more clearly in a map with less detail on it, we've categorized those features into the core areas, linkages, and karst features in the solid green, the conceptual buffers with the dashed lines, where there may be some land use in there, but it's going to need some setbacks from the features. The recommended restoration areas shown in the lighter green. Some alternative restoration areas have been identified, and the reason for that is some of these areas have other challenges to them, such as accessing the area because it got limited road frontage or lack of road frontage due to the rail line and Regional Road 20 and the natural heritage feature in here, the water course. And then down in the southeast, there are some constraints related to floodline and some servicing challenges in the southeast. And so those have been identified as potential restoration areas where open space uses or regeneration of the area into a natural state could be considered. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight from the natural heritage system review is it's hard to see, but there are some smaller, more isolated features, which are shown in gray. And those wetlands have not been officially evaluated. They haven't been identified as provincially significant. They are recommended as part of the natural heritage system, but the policies would recommend some further review of those through development applications or more detailed planning work. Of course, through this process, we need to link this back to the region's Municipal Comprehensive Review, or MCR, and the land needs that the region has identified for West Lincoln. So the region has developed, as I'm sure you know, the population and employment forecasts for each local municipality to the year 2051, and then has estimated the amount of land required in each urban area, or for each municipality, how much urban land is required to accommodate that growth. Put it simply, there's 2 categories of land that the region is identifying a need for. The first is community area, which is everything but industry and employment uses, and then employment area, which is typical industry and non-population related employment. So you can see the majority of the urban expansion area is, if this is the urban the shape that the urban boundary takes, would be for this beige color, which is the community area identified in the preferred concept. And there would be a smaller amount of land added for employment uses. And then the agriculture related area really doesn't fall into either of those categories and wouldn't require an urban boundary in order to permit those types of uses contemplated for that area. We've also worked towards refining the land use areas. So this is very similar to the preliminary preferred concept, but has been refined based on the new natural heritage system or the updated natural heritage system. really quite minor refinements, but we will continue to update this based on the results of the impact assessments, servicing, traffic, and so forth. This one, again, will be a bit hard to see. I think I can zoom in a little bit here. This map is really important because it identifies 3 overall alternative traffic routes or traffic corridors that could be created that are being tested through the traffic impact assessment. The first, again, the intent of all 3 of these options would be really to create an alternative route primarily for trucks. So diverting heavy truck traffic around the core of Smithville. That builds on the region's transportation master plan, which had identified conceptually from the east side of Smithville going around to the north, that there would be some sort of bypass to allow trucks to move around the community in a different route. So the ACOM, as the transportation consultants, has come up with 3 options. The first option, option A, shown as the blue line, would extend from Regional Road 20 over here to the west of Smithville, turn east at the Hydro Corridor, so right on the south side of the corridor there, to Industrial Park Road, then south from there to London Road and create the 4th leg of that intersection with Industrial Park Road east, and then curving back to the south, back to Regional Road 20 at the east limit of the study area. So this option, option A, would involve obviously creation of some new roads that don't exist today, and also involves 2 what's shown here as grade separated, which really means a bridge, crossings with the Canadian Pacific Railway with the CPR. Option B is similar, but is routed further north. So option B would go all the way up to Yonge Street, and then across Yonge Street, further east to, I believe this is an unopened right-of-way, and I think would be South Grimsby Road 2, if the road was there. I think it obviously goes for some natural heritage areas, but would rejoin Regional Road 20 after crossing the rail corridor in this location. B1 and B2 are shown as 2 alternative locations where that road could intersect with Regional Road 20 in the southeast. And then finally, the third option looks at a different route altogether, which would be to route the traffic to the south. So moving from Regional Road 20 west of Smithville, crossing 20 Mile Creek along South Grimsby Road 7, and then bending that route to the east, and then coming back through the south part of Smithville along Town Line Road. So perhaps that section is not ideal because it does route that bypass through part of the community. So these options are being reviewed a bit further by the transportation consultants to model how traffic operations perform, or predicted traffic levels perform at various horizon years if those routes were in place. One of the key factors that's being looked at along with this analysis is the opportunity for connection to the north-south Niagara Escarpment crossing at Bartlett Avenue that's being planned by the region through a separate environmental assessment process. So just to almost wrapped up here, we've got a couple of next steps that we wanted to highlight for you. One of the comments we received back was, are there enough community facilities shown? How many schools would be needed? What are the impacts of this growth on future school needs? So we are setting up meetings with the region and some agencies, the school boards in particular, as well as some provincial agencies, to review some of those matters in more detail. A second public information, or it really will be the third of the project, but it's referred to as PIC number 2, is scheduled for October 6th. It will be held in a virtual format very similar to the previous one in February. Beyond that, we are targeting to bring forward to you some recommendations about the preferred urban boundary location for October 12th. Phase 2 impact assessments are expected to continue to the end of next month. And then phase 3, as I mentioned earlier, will commence in November and really run through much of the first quarter of 2022. A third public information center, which will be a public meeting of council, would be held sometime in February of 2022 is our target for that. So that's my presentation. I thank you very much for your time and attention tonight. And similar to Dan's presentation, really at this point, we're looking for your initial sense of any feedback, questions, any comments that you want us to consider, and we'll do our best to respond to those. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. I'm going to go to members of committee. Is there any members of committee? I see Mayor Bylsma.
So through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Weaver, thank you very much for the presentation. I see some promising guidance that has been, brought to bear in kind of the tweaked version that you're bringing to us today. Most notably, I'm very pleased that the potential is there. Obviously to further consideration, but utilizing the existing hydro corridor as a potential road network. I'm kind of in favor, or strongly in favor, of the option A. That I'm glad it's also called option A, because I think it is something that is practical, very approachable. If you go too far out of the way, trucks are more inclined to kind of take the shortcuts, and again, come back to that, our downtown core, which is what we're trying to avoid. If we make it convenient for them and efficient, I think that, for example, the option A services our industrial parks very well, provides safe egress. I understand, option A and option B both have grade separations for the rail lines, but at the end of the day, safety is paramount. And so, I think that's very beneficial. So I wanted to just express on that particular issue. I did have a question about the reforestation. Is that those reforestation, is that something that has to be undertaken by the landowner, or is that, how does that happen? Who's responsible for that? It's kind of a cost, but there's no real benefit to the landowner as such. I appreciate a tree as much as anybody, but it's interesting that one that was emptied out, the U, is now going to be filled and reforested again. So just some comments about how that takes place.
Maybe we go to go back to Steve there. You're able to answer that?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, yes, I can give some sense of the conversation around that so far, although ultimately how that would be implemented will be recommended in some policies. So there's definitely more detail to come on that. There is still some discussion going on about that specific restoration area. One of the discussions I had with the natural heritage consultants, NRSI, who recommended that restoration area, is could there be opportunity for some compatible community use, say, nature trails, interpretive features, things that are usable as recreational assets that may help with some of the cost to offset some of the development related costs. So really what we see is that type of restoration would likely occur with the development of the balance of the parcel, and that there would be some considerations around public recreational benefit that might arise from the restoration of the area, and maybe even community engagement initiatives in the restoration efforts themselves, whether there would be programs that could be taken advantage of through the NPCA or others as well. Sometimes there are tree planting initiatives and that sort of thing that can help to reduce the costs. So it's not just purely a developer responsibility, but again, those types of options will be looked at in more detail through the implementing policies that correspond to those restoration areas.
Okay, and then just in general,
Mr. Mayor, I just see our director of planning had his hand up, so if I could just, I think he wants to chip in or chime in here.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I don't mean to interrupt, but just following up on what Steve mentioned, we are still working with the landowners group around the refinement of some of those environmental features.
Okay.
So and Steve has alluded to that a number of times. So we haven't necessarily landed on exactly what the boundaries will be, but it's clear that in order to move forward and get support from the region and the province, we have to take some initiative towards increasing our forest cover and providing green space and whatnot for the community. And you're right, that doesn't necessarily make money for the developers, but to be a complete community and attractive community, we do definitely need that. And it's been identified that we are deficient in forest cover and green space in the Smithville area. So we do have some further work to do in refining and working with the landowners around some of that stuff. And you'll start to see that unfold as we move forward.
Yeah, so thank you for that, Mr. Treble. And so I just wanted to kind of say overall, I'm pleased with, the refinement that has gotten to us this far. I was very concerned. Option B was, in my opinion, kind of a disaster, resurrecting an old bypass route and then accommodating our growth kind of with that in mind. And I think that one is, as you looked or heard from the PIC, that generally speaking, people thought that the bypass should go north. And I agree with that assessment, keeping our industrial lands kind of as a conglomerate. At this point, we're still a small town, so having them in one cluster kind of collectively, I think is wise. Over time, there might be opportunities, as the town grows to consider other nodes of industrial growth. But for now, our town is developing quite nicely with a west and south growth of residential, tends to be in the quieter pastoral end of the municipality. And then the industrial, node tend to be expanding, certainly not so large that roads and stuff are being impacted or I think that there's still a lot of room for capacity in that end. So in general, very pleased with the way that this has been refined. So I just wanted to get that out, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any other members of committee? Okay, not seeing any. I'll just throw in my 2 cents here as well. I'm very much in line with the mayor on this one. I know I was concerned originally with option 2 when it was brought to us, running that down through a heavily a neighborhood area, bringing the truck bypass down through at least 2 schools, if not the 3rd schools, while having a crossing of children, to me just seemed like a disaster waiting to happen. I personally would like to see that idea even just removed from the drawings. Going forward, you heard from the community wants us to go north, whether that's option A or B. I'm kind of good with either of those, but I do agree with the mayor there. I think option A probably seems the more logical approach, because if people are trying to save a few minutes, they are more likely to kind of try to cut through our town, and it kind of almost makes the bypass pointless. So I do think option A is really the only option there is. So anyways, I just wanted to mention that. I don't see anybody else, any other members of committee or staff commenting, so we'll move forward. Let me just bring up my screen here. Okay, so that being said, we're going to go to so thank you, Steve. Thank you very much for your presentation again. And I guess we'll be discussing this shortly. But I just wanted to thank you. I kind of just jumped into the next topic there. So we're going to go to the next section, which is request to address items on the agenda. So this is for people in the gallery here under section 10:13, 5 and 6, general rules. We'll allocate 1 hour for this section of the agenda. Actually, show my glasses on here. And each individual person shall be permitted about 5 minutes to address their issue. Some exceptions may apply. A response may be provided or may not be provided. The matter may be referred to staff. So if you have a question that we're unable to answer, just given new or recent information, we might ask you to follow up with us afterwards. A person who wishes to discuss a planning application or a matter that can be appealed can be permitted to speak up to 10 minutes. So at this point, I'm going to see if there's any members in the gallery. I know Lillian originally, I believe, if you're still here with us, there's a matter you had talked about, so this would be a good time to do that. You're already permitted to talk, Lillian, so if you can still hear me, you're welcome to have the floor here for your item. So I'll just give you another couple seconds there. Seeing if there's anybody else in the meantime. I think Lillian's question was regarding considering lot 4 on Young Street, South Grimsby Road 16 as a different type of subdivision. It'd be great if, I don't know if she can hear us.
Mr. Chair, I can certainly.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear
Yes,
you.
I wanted to once again apologize for not being able to hear you. Oh, I came to the coffee shop without my earbuds.
No worries.
I only wanted.
So
to
Lillian, if
ask
I could just
that-
ask one more favor. So I know you did this originally, but just kind of get us back on topic. Could you just state your full name and your address again, just for the clerk?
It's Lillian Josic or Josic, Jocic, Lillian with 2 L's, and from 31 Catalina Drive in Hamilton.
Okay, excellent.
And I would just like to ask that the council consider including the property located at Young and South Grimsby Road 16 as part of the hamlet, as it is the first property that's next to the last property home on that side of the street, the west side of South Grimsby Road 16. I had received an invitation to attend this meeting, but when I looked at the information, I saw that that was not marked on the map, and so I'm just asking that the committee consider that. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Lillian. I don't know if Brian, if you wanted to. Yep.
I know we wouldn't normally respond now, but just if I may, Mr. Chair, just to make sure I'm clear. We have identified a parcel which I believed to be the Josic property on the northwest side of the intersection. Lillian makes reference to South Grimsby 16, but I think Fulton is South Grimsby 18. So I'm not sure if there's a parcel at South Grimsby 16. She's also asking to be added, which we can't do because it's not contiguous with a hamlet. But certainly their parcel at the northwest corner of South Grimsby 18 and Highway 20, about 6 hectares, is identified on page 237 of the agenda, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Lillian. If it's possible, maybe if there's any confusion whatsoever, maybe you can reach out again to staff in the next day or two and bring that closer to their attention, just so that in the event that we're misunderstanding you in some capacity today.
Mm-hmm. That was part of that property. It's just up in the upper to the north of that property that we're speaking of today.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Lillian.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just go back to the gallery one more time. So this is your chance to speak to any item on the agenda. Again, if you're on a phone, it's *9. Otherwise, you just got to raise your hand. I'll give you guys there 5-6 seconds or so. Actually, I'll go to the deputy clerk. Did you get any written or submitted comments today?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did receive a couple written comments that Brian is going to discuss once the items come up later on.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I don't see any other hands up, so we're going to move forward. Before we move forward, do any members of the committee need to use the washroom or anything like that, or are we good to proceed? We're good. Staff's good. Okay, perfect. So we're going to move forward to consent items. So the recommendation that Planning, Building, Environmental Committee hereby approves the following consent items. 1 being hereby received for information, and 2 and 3 being hereby received, and that the recommendations contained therein be adopted with the following exceptions, and currently there are none. A technical report, PD 94/2021, Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 2017-70 as amended, housekeeping amendments number 5, introduction of new housing types. 2, recommendation report PD 104, 2021 East Smithville Secondary Plan Project Amendment to Budget BA 2021-09. And 3, recommendation report PD 95, 2021 Site Plan Approval Authorization 5138 Concession for Road Niagara Regional Sportsman Club. So I'm going to need a mover. So I can get Councilor Bradrick and Councilor Ganan. And then is there any items anyone's looking to pull? Are we good to vote? Okay, not seeing any and no comments. So all those in favor? Okay, so that passes. So now we have no communications today. And that brings us to staff reports. For our first staff report up is item P8721, Planner 2, Madison Etzel, and Director of Planning and Building, Brian Treble. Recommendation report PD 101, 2021, Garden Suite Official Plan Policy Amendment, Official Plan Amendment number 61. And the recommendation is that report PD 101, 2021 regarding the Garden Suite Official Plan Policy Amendment, Official Plan Amendment number 61, dated September 13th, 2021 be received, and that section 3417 of the Planning Act apply, and that no further public meeting is required, and that application 1701-00321 number 61 for the official plan amendment be approved, and that the necessary bylaw be prepared at the Township Council meeting, and that staff circulate the notice of approval in accordance with the Planning Act, and that staff be authorized to circulate the notice of decision for the zoning bylaw amendment with the corresponding 20-day appeal period. So I'm going to need someone to move that for me. I have Mayor Bylsma and Councilor Bradrick. Any questions or comments? I have Mayor Bylsma.
Yeah, just briefly, I'm very much in favor of this for the reasons that Councilor Ganan stated earlier. It gives options to families to be able to find housing and afford housing, and so I'm pleased to bring this forward as such.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any other question or comments? Not seeing any. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Okay, so that carries. Moving forward, did I skip one? No, okay, good. 10-2. All right, so item P8821, Planner 2, Madison Etzel, and Director of Planning and Building, Brian Treble. Recommendation report, PD 102, 2021, Zoning Bylaw Amendment, Temporary Use of Bylaw, Richard and Anita Merritt, Garden Suite Application. So the recommendation is that the report PD 102, 2021 regarding the zoning bylaw amendment, temporary use bylaw, Richard and Anita Merritt, Garden Suite application dated September 13th, 2021 be received, and that section 3417 of the Planning Act apply, and that no further public meeting is required, and that an application for zoning bylaw amendment 1601-011-21 submitted by Richard and Anita Merritt and a corresponding zoning bylaw be approved and passed, and that staff be authorized to circulate the notice of decision for the zoning bylaw amendment with the corresponding 20-day appeal period. So I'm going to need someone to move that for me. I got Councilor Ganan. If I can get a seconder, I got Councilor Bradrick. Any questions or comments? Oh, I got our Director of Planning here. So Brian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't mean to belabor anything. I just wanted to sort of make sure that everyone was understanding the linkage between the first report, which committee just dealt with under staff reports, that recommended changing the 10-year time limitation to 20 years. Now that that's been supported, you can support this application to use the 20-year timeline. Then when we get to council, we'll need to pass the bylaw to implement the first staff report before we pass the bylaw to approve Anita Merritt's request. So the order is important, but because you've supported the first one, you can now support this one.
Yeah, and thank you for that added clarity, because I think, for anybody who's watching who might be unsure what's happening, this is just a better way of making it more efficient, so you don't have to wait a month or two till you can do it again and they can move forward with their plans. So all that being said, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Okay, that carries. I'm going to move forward to 10-3. Item P8921, Planner 1, Megan Burbick, and Director of Planning and Building, Brian Treble. Recommendation report, PDO 106, 2021, Gyro Estate Zoning Bylaw Amendment, file number 1601-01021. And the recommendation is that report, PD 106, 2021, regarding the Gyro Estate Zoning Bylaw Amendment, file number 1601-01021, dated September 13th, 2021, be received, and that section 3417 of the Planning Act apply, and that no further public meeting is required, and that an application of for the zoning bylaw amendment 1601-01021 submitted by Upper Canada Consultants and a corresponding zoning bylaw be approved and passed, and that staff be authorized to circulate the notice of decision for the zoning bylaw amendment with the corresponding 20-day appeal period. So I'm going to need a mover. Now, Councillor Braderick and a seconder. Councillor Ganan, any questions or comments? I got Mayor Bylsma.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Chair. This one, I must say, did bother me a little bit. When it came forward as a public meeting in the last at our last meetings set, I believe, you know, a comment was made by the neighbor, and I made the same comment. And I think one of the other councillors, or one or two of them, addressed a similar issue, and that was, I believe it's lot number 3. It's the one right kind of in the middle of the development. There's 2 that come off Regional Road 69, and then there's 3 that come off the cul-de-sac, I think it's Meadow Court cul-de-sac. And it's the northerly one of that 3. And the comment was made that the house that's proposed is situated quite close to the property line of an existing house. It's a little bit on an angle, quite close to the front edge of the property. And I don't know at this point how much in stone that is, but I saw no change after the public meeting in the siting of that house. And I think that I thought then, and I think now, that we can do better by either straightening up that house and moving a little bit more to the west, giving a little bit more comfort to the existing neighbor who has enjoyed, you know, the fields that were there for many, many times. And so I don't know if my comments at this point are even, you know, like premature, or if this is final, that's the siting of that house. And so I really, at this point, I'm not in favor of approving this, because I think that house should be moved. I think it's contrary to the fabric of you know, country dwellings and having space and privacy. And so I'm wondering if maybe I'm missing something. Is there a barrier to moving it west? So that's my question.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to go to the Director of Planning first, because I realized he had his hand up and I should have went with him originally. So I don't know, Brian, if you want to make, if this kind of was going to be in any part of your original question or comment.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it was actually, and I see Megan has her hand up as well. Bottom line is that Megan has communicated with Mr. Connell, the property owner to the east. And he has seen the concept sketch that is found on page 169 of the report at attachment 1, and is satisfied with the proposal, which identifies that the house location will be situated to the west, and the septic system to the east side, and that in conjunction with the presence of fencing as a requirement in the development agreement, he indicates that he is willing to withdraw his concern, and he is satisfied. So,
and I'm satisfied with that as well, Mr. But looks like Megan's having some visual problems, so she'd like to speak to it.
Yes,
too.
so Megan, you're welcome to. I have to ask you to unmute, I guess it says. I don't know. There you go.
So through the chair, thank you. And I'd just like to point out that my camera doesn't work very well, so I'm sorry about that. So just to add on to what Brian mentioned, Upper Canada Consulting, the agent, actually made a new map, and it's in attachment 4, and that is page 190, I believe, of the plan, and it actually shows the proposed dwelling to be moved back from the original concept plan. And again, they're just concept plans. They're not, there's nothing in stone with where the dwelling is proposed, but the attachment 4 does show the house further back than the initial mapping that is in attachment 1. So in attachment 4, it shows the septic north of their driveway, kind of separating the residents who had initially had a concern with this lot 3. In attachment 4, you can see that The proposed dwelling is roughly 66 to 67 meters away from the dwelling on that neighboring property. That's a concern. And the proposed dwelling is 47, 48 meters away from their actual lot line. So what also should be noted is that the resident who had an issue, he's actually a lot closer to his neighbor to the east in terms of the distance from his house to his current neighbor. And he actually looks into the backyard of his current neighbor, where this proposed lot 3 does not look into his back yard. It just looks into the front yard.
Perfect. Oh,
Thank
that's
you so
great.
much.
All right. So is there any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? And opposed? Not hearing any. I know Councilor Ganan might be having some internet issues, so I'm going to carry that. That's carried.
Sorry.
Cheryl just had to close her windows. It's storming.
Oh, that's okay. And I know I can hear the thunder going. I'm hoping we don't lose power when we get this. Oh, sorry. You have a question, or is that your vote?
No, a late vote, sorry.
Okay, that's fine. It carries.
But my internet is going in and out as well, so I'm going to shut the video back on. Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you, Councillor. All right, so that carries there, Jessica. So now I'm going to move on to item P90 2021 bylaw enforcement officer Tiana Dominic and director in planning and building Brian Treble. Recommendation report PD 108 2021 approval of a new bylaw non-parking administrative penalty bylaw, and that the recommendation is PD 108 2021 regarding recommendation report approval of a new non-parking administrative monetary penalty bylaw dated September 13th 2021 be received, and that a bylaw be adopted at council with multiple short form schedules in the form found at attachment 1 to this report, including clean yard, site alteration, boulevard, swimming pool, sign, and with potential more amendments in the near future. So if I can get a mover, Councilor Braderick and Mayor Billsma would be my seconder. Any questions or comments? Sorry, Director, you can go ahead.
Mr. Chair, just to tie this together, a few months ago, we had given you a sample of what the bylaw would look like and said that we'd come back after we had consulted with Township Legal Counsel. And so with Sarah's guidance, we have identified the schedules that are attached to this bylaw. I know the fire department is interested in this short form wording and this AMPS approach with respect to some of their issues as well. Not to give you false hope, but the ticketing method is sort of a way to get the attention of people through an enforcement mechanism quick and easy, because you issue a ticket of a fine, and that hopefully gets their attention to the matter, and they come talk to staff or cooperate with us a little bit quicker. But Waynfleet, as an example, has used this approach now for about a year, and it's actually generating enough revenue to help offset some of the costs of the department. So not to give you any certainty that that will happen here, but bylaw tends to be a drain on resources, and if we can generate a little bit of revenue at the same time for those people that are repeat offenders, that might actually be a bit of an incentive to pay attention the next time. So this approach, we hope, will work, and we'll report back and let you know.
Thank you. And I think it's worth noting that the key phrase you used there was repeat offenders. You know, I mean, I think a lot of people don't realize the strain it certainly puts on the community and the tax base when we have to go continuously. So I think this is, long overdue, and I think it's going to be a welcome adjustment, and hopefully it does kind of get some of those repeat offenders more compliant. So, all right. So all that being said, I don't see any other questions or comments. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And we lost Cheryl, I think, because they're starting to thunder pretty good here. That vote will carry. I'll vote to support that as well. So that carries. Although I guess if she's not here, it doesn't matter. I'll make it noted that Councilor Gannon is not here at the moment, but we're going to keep moving just in case we all lose power. Item 9121. Oh, I see Jessica. Sorry, go ahead.
Councillor Riley, without Councillor Gannon, we don't have a quorum.
All right. Interesting dilemma.
Oh, she is
there she
back.
Oh,
She might need to call in if her.
that's okay. Good point. Thank you for catching that. So we'll just take a step back there.
Sorry, it totally dropped that time, but
No problem. And so we actually need your vote to hold quorum here. So if you can hear us, but you can't see it, that's okay. If you want to call in, whatever works. I see, on my screen, I see your eyes closed. So I'm assuming your system froze. Go ahead, Madam CO.
I just said I vote to support, but I texted it to our CAO.
Okay. So I'm going to go to
the up with this meeting. Sorry.
I'm going to go to the. So, Councilor Gannon, if for whatever reason you continue to have like internet trouble where it keeps shutting down on you, I'm going to suggest, if it's all right with the clerk and the rest of the committee here, that maybe you could call in either the clerk and then be on the phone, and so we could hear your verbal support, or the CAO, either or. Sorry, go ahead, Madam CO.
I'm wondering, Roberta, sorry, through you, Chair, Roberta, is that the best way, or should the council
call into the meeting?
Yeah, call in directly.
So
it may be easier if Councillor Gannon, if you could call into the meeting. I'm not sure if you've got the number there, but I'll look it up and send it to you.
Okay, thank you.
So if that continues to happen, yeah, just give a call back into the meeting and we'll just.
Hopefully not. Like it's slowed down again out there. So
yeah.
Maybe we'll be fine.
That big rumble that's gonna knock us all off the Zoom here. All right, so that passes. And so now we're gonna go to, and we have quorum. So now we're gonna go back to item 9121. So information report PD 107 2021 regional official plan work and township led rural hamlet rural employment considerations. And the recommendation is that report PD 107 regarding recommendation report regional official plan work and township led rural hamlet rural employment considerations dated September 13 2021 be received for information purposes, and that a final report for endorsement of the proposed boundary adjustments and requirements be provided to the region, be presented in the fall of 2021 once further consultant, regional, and agency input has been received. So if I can get a mover, I have Councillor Gannon and then Councillor Broderick as a seconder. I'm going to open up any questions or comments at this time. I have Director of Planning. So Brian, you go first.
Again, Mr. Chair, I'll be brief, excuse me. This is another one of those reports where, as Jessica identified, the deputy clerk identified, we had received some correspondence today. So I'm not going to read it into the record, but just acknowledge it on the record that Nick and Frank DeFilippis provided some comments with respect to the Fulton hamlet as well. So Ms. Josic represents one side of the hamlet and the DeFilippis represent the other side of the hamlet. So they're both expressing interest in that case, and I'll make sure this item of correspondence is provided to Jessica for the minutes.
Perfect, thank you. That being said, not seeing or hearing comments or questions for anyone else. We're good. Okay, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Okay, that carries. So we're going to move forward to 10.6. And it's information report PD 105 2021 regional official plan work and the West Lincoln master plan urban boundary review project by the Township of West Lincoln consulting teams AECOM and Wood. Recommendation that PD 105 2021 regarding information report regional official plan work in the West Lincoln master community plan urban boundary review project by the Township of West Lincoln consulting teams dated September 13th 2021 be received for information purposes, and that staff will present a future recommendation report at a proceeding after the proceeding with the PIC 2 on October 6 2021. Notice will be provided to the public very soon. I've never seen very soon in one of the recommendations, but I trust it's got to be pretty soon. We're less than a month away. So I'm going to get a mover. If I get a mover, I got Councillor Broderick and then Mayor Bylsma. Any questions or comments at this point? So go ahead, Director.
Again, Mr. Chair, another item of correspondence was received today on this report from Sorensen Gravely Lowe's. That's Mr. Paul Lowe's on behalf of the Landowners Association. I know Mr. Tony Miele was on this as an observer tonight. The natural heritage system, as I alluded to earlier, is still under consideration. They're identifying that they still have a few concerns, but my message to you is that at this point in time, that's still an issue to be deliberated on amongst the professionals on all sides of the review process. And, you know, at some point, if we aren't able to come to a resolution or an agreement, then it might have to be something that's dealt with by this committee. But at this point, it'd be premature to ask for committee to weigh in. So I just want you to be aware that we're still sorting through some of the environmental pieces of the puzzle.
Excellent. Thank you for that clarity. And any other comments or questions from the committee? Not seeing any, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? And oh, perfect. So that carries. And we're going to move to other business. Do any members of the committee have any other business of informative nature? Not seeing any. New business. Not seeing any, so we can keep going. So that's going to bring us to confidential matters. The recommendation is that the next portion of this meeting be closed to the public to consider the following pursuant to section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001. Bylaw enforcement officer Tiana Dominic and director of planning and building Brian Treble, legal enforcement matter quarterly bylaw update. The applicable closed session exemptions are litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, the security of a property of the municipality or local board, advice that is subject to solicitor client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. As well, we have Director of Planning and Building Brian Treble, confidential matter, we got recommendation report PD 72 2021, property matter, legal matter, monitoring of John Street property, Casterville, and the exemptions are litigation or potential litigation, including matters before the administrative tribunal affecting the municipality or local board, and advice that is subject to solicitor client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. And almost there. And that so the next one is confidential recommendation report PD 10321, natural severance on concession 2 road and concession 3 road, Caster Center, and the exemptions are litigation or potential litigation, including matters before the administration tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, and advice that is subject to solicitor client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. So that's all those. And then so I guess I need a mover. And so I got Mayor Bylsma. I need a seconder. So I got Councillor Ganan. I got this point. So we're going to vote to go into close. All those in favor. So that carries. So we are now at 9:01 officially closed. So I see everyone. All right. So welcome back, everyone. This committee now resumes an open session at the hour of 9:44 p.m. I have item. And I just want to confirm one more time with the clerk. I see these broken down in 3 items. So are we going to vote on these 3 times, or do I read it all and then we do one vote? Three reads?
You, Mr. Chair, you need to have a mover and a seconder to come back into open.
Yeah.
Okay. So I got Councillor Ganan as the mover and Mayor Bylsma, as the seconder. So I do now resume at 9:45 p.m. My apologies for that. And just to clarify, I think I understand. I saw Mayor Bylsma's fingers up. I'm going to read each item separately. And we vote on them separately, correct? Okay. So item P9421, bylaw enforcement officer Tiana Dominic, director of planning and building Brian Treble, legal matter quarterly bylaw update. I guess I've got for a mover and a seconder for that.
There was nothing.
Okay. And okay, so I got Mayor Bylsma and Councillor Broderick, and all those in favor. Oh, I see Jessica's hand up again. Sorry, Jessica.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, there was no resolution for that one.
Okay, I didn't think so. That's why I was asking if there was 3 in there.
Sorry, only the 2. My apologies.
No, it's okay. we just came back from we all just came back from the summer, so I feel rusty myself. So
You've now received it for information. There you go. Yeah.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All right. So item 9521, recommendation report PD 72 2021, property matter, legal matter, monitoring of John Street property, Casterville. And the recommendation is that report PD 72 2021 regarding confidential recommendation report, property matter, legal matter, monitoring of John Street property, Casterville, dated September 13th, 2021 be received, and that staff be authorized to proceed as directed in closed session, and that staff report back with an update on this monitoring project as required. If I can get a mover and seconder for this one now. So I got Councillor Ganan and Councillor Broderick. Assuming there's no questions or comments, all those in favor? Okay, that carries. And we're going to go to P96 2021, confidential recommendation report, PD 10321, natural severance on concession 2 road and concession 3 road, Caster Center. That report, PD 103 2021, regarding confidential recommendation report, natural severance and concession road 2 and concession road 3, Caster, dated September 13th, 2021, be received, and that staff be authorized to proceed as directed in closed session. Again, assuming there's no other comments or questions, I'm going to call the question or the vote. All those in favor? Okay, that is carried. So that brings us to adjournment. So I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 9:47 p.m. Everybody have a great night. Stay safe, and we'll hopefully, I guess we'll see you next week at the next meeting.
Good. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Right.